Bang.
Bang is right.
Episode 140, 147, Pete.
It's not official until we get that. That's why when you don't bring it along with you, we got
this.
It's official.
It's official. You guys are tuned in to the Rebel's Edge. Pete Najarian, John Najarian, Jared, who is handling all the difficult stuff. All Pete and I have to do is talk about it. There's Jared, the dancing robot.
That's phenomenal.
Like that, just dance across the screen. Folks, we appreciate you tuning in, especially on a day when crude oil is getting the crap kicked out of it. It's back down to 68.56. We'll have some things to say about consumer demand and so forth. But let's kick it off, Pete, with exactly that in the macro minute. Consumers are weakening, according to a McKinsey survey. And these are folks that are consultants worldwide, but they basically asked about 4,000 U.S. consumers what they were doing, and 80% said they're cutting back. They're reducing and trading down. So they might still have to eat, but they're going to different places that are less expensive, and they're shopping at places that they perceive as more of a value than the upper level places that they'd like to be shopping.
John, let me tell you something. I do boots on the ground, as you know, and I could have told you that without that big, huge thing they had. I see 300 cars in front of Walmart and 25 in front of Target. End of story. People are trading down. It's Fed Day, John, so that's what I'm going to use for my macro minute. Is it the briefcase? I don't really think so. Has he been transparent? 100%. I look for the quarter rise, but it is what he has to say afterwards for the data situation. They're going to look at the data. That will be interesting to see the reaction then, because, John, today the market is not going anywhere at this point, at least.
Yep. Well, and I'll be on with Liz Clayman, Pete, right after the Fed makes their decision, and it'll be 0.25%. But then, like Pete said, the most important thing is what Jay Powell is going to say, and if somebody sneaks a question in on him that he's not ready for. Not as likely that they're likely to get a question in that he's not ready for, but he might have several that he doesn't like based on what Pete and I have just said about the consumer trading down. They're trading down because interest rates are up, because bank failures are up, and because inflation's up. Go figure. All right. The favorite section of the program, Fantastic Futures. That echo gets deeper all the time. I think, Jared, you're going to need that little robot to dance across and maybe hold up its arms and, do a little bit of that. Fantastic Futures. I'm right back to that crude oil, Pete, because it's plunging over the economy and whether or not consumers are going to be cutting back, driving less, all the rest. Oil is down for a third straight day. It broke 70. It broke 69. And as you heard me say at top of the show, it's 68.5 right now, Pete.
It's getting hit. It's getting slammed. I mean, it's something we've been talking about, a lot of the different things that are moving, John, and we've talked about specifically crude. It was 83 just 2.5 weeks ago. And here we are now today in the 68. So significantly down about 5% today. Nat gas down about 5% today or more. And then you've got gold and silver with a little bit of a bump to the upside. So we're seeing some movement there in a lot of the different commodities area. And as we know, old Terry, they got it all.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for the Fantastic Futures, Jared. Again, we always love Fantastic Futures.
Well done, Jared.
Pete, let's dive into IMMUNOGEN. This one, IMGN, it was up over 140% today. We've had unusual activity in this name basically for weeks, Pete. We've had buying of calls, upside calls, and the stock, of course, on this move. Basically, it's a ovarian cancer in phase 3 trials, Pete. That's what this drug is for. And the stock popped that big because this is a huge deal. Obviously, if they can get through this trial and get that life-saving drug to women that need it, that'd be fantastic. And they were buying these calls, folks, with the stock at $4. And then they were buying it at $5. And they were still buying them Monday when the stock was $5. It traded through $13 today. So you can imagine that's why I'm wearing the 10X hat, because it's pretty damn near a 10X, Pete, between the calls they were buying at the 4 strike. All you got to do is plug in the math, folks. If they're buying those calls at the 4 strike and it's trading at 13, that's worth $9. So bang.
It's why you use the leverage of the options world. You also have to know the timing of it, of course, as we've talked about many, many times. And oftentimes they're not right with the timing. This time they were. John, as a matter of fact, they have a huge short interest here. This is an incredibly big deal, actually, for people. It extends lives significantly. We're talking 4 or 5 months longer as well. I mean, there's a lot of different things about this that sound great. And I think everybody's excited. The one thing is, they do have an incredible cash burn. They've got that big short. That's why we're getting squeezed. John, it wasn't too long ago we were at those 52-week lows. As you were talking about, the lows were 3. We were trading $4 not too terribly long ago. Here we are at the 52-week highs over 13. I don't think it's necessarily done. And as a matter of fact, if you want to talk about a candidate for somebody out there who wants to make an acquisition, not saying anything, I know nothing about it, but look, these guys are running out of cash, so they're in a position for something, and they're right there on the cusp of getting something to the market. I mean, they're in phase 3. Now you've got to get the FDA approval. That's how this whole game works. If they can do that, I think somebody, before they get to that FDA decision, might have to take a little bit of a flyer on this one, John, because I'll tell you what, this is going to be a monstrous drug.
Yep. God bless them. This is fantastic. And like Pete said, right now it's about extending life for people that otherwise would, after chemo and everything else, not be able to live more than like 12 months. And this is pushing it out to 16 months. And hopefully, eventually, they can get to something that arrests it totally. 82 million shares change hands today, Pete, versus 3.7 million average. So yeah, this is hardly a secret. Let's talk about Estee Lauder now, Pete, EL, because this one similarly trading huge turnover and it's falling hard, down 15%. Cosmetic giant forecast a bigger drop in full year sales and profits, slower than expected recovery in China. I mean, you could throw the kitchen sink at it. These guys, and it's another one of those, canaries in the coal mine, Pete, that is telling you the consumer is slowing down because you've got a daughter, I've got 2. I can't imagine them cutting back. The last thing they're going to cut back on is cosmetics, Pete. So this is, if Estee Lauder is feeling the pinch here, that's a tell.
Yeah, and they are feeling the pinch, John, because some of the numbers they put up were absolutely astoundingly awful. When you look right now, I'll give you a good example. Revenue down 12. They missed by 12%. I mean, it's really just falling apart. A year ago, John, their earnings were 47. Well, they're 47 cents now. They're $1.90 a year ago. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor for how bad things are really going. Their skincare products were down 20%. When you go to specifically Europe and Africa, it's down 26% on the net sales. Those are huge numbers, and those are big areas. When you go across, obviously the Americas is a big deal. You're talking about China and so forth. But when you look at Europe, you look at Africa, and that whole part of the world, you're down 20 some odd percent. That is not a good thing. This stock was really getting hammered. It's gotten off of those lows though, John. I think it was down to 190. Last I looked, it was closer towards 200, 205. It's still getting pounded, but it is off of those lows, which were very close to the 52-week lows.
Yeah. And, when Pete's talking about that miss, folks, the miss is also that they cut the full year guidance, like he said, dramatically. They were looking for 360. They're saying they're going to do 360. The street had been thinking until they said that 535. So that is a big lowering of expectations. And that's why that stock, 10 and a half, almost 11 million share turnover, Pete, 1.3 million is normal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I've got a lithium stock, and you know, Pete, lithium is my middle name. I don't know why my mom decided that, but
That was weird.
So LTHM is the symbol. It's up big today on big volume. LIVENT, basically living large, because after hours, they announced that this pure play lithium producer is going to be coming out with fantastic earnings. Nothing about fantastic futures, Jared, but fantastic future. Yeah, their future looks fantastic, I think. And that's why the stock is up so big today, Pete.
Yeah, they extended their deal that they've got, John, with BMW as well. But you look across at these numbers. How about this? The revenue was up 77%. The earnings are up 186%. I mean, these numbers are absolutely astounding. And if you don't understand the EV space and the demand on lithium, that's what we're talking about here. And it's absolutely incredible. This company is doing everything right. I think they're still pretty daggone cheap, John. But all you got to do is look at the 52-week, right? And you see 18 on the low end, 36 on the high end. Stock's trading around 23. It's up about 8 or 9%. I think there's plenty of room left. I think the demand is out there for the EV space, and it will continue. And I think these guys are going to be one of those that really does have a great influence, and people are going to be jumping for that lithium.
Yep, no doubt. There is simply not enough lithium, folks, for everybody to have the piece that they need to make these batteries. Now, one of the reasons they use lithium instead of salt and other versions that can store power is the weight. And I'm not saying lithium batteries that they put in a Tesla are not heavy. They're very heavy. But you can imagine if you were using some of the iron and some of the other methods for storing energy, you know, these would have to all be trucks, because this is a metal, an energy metal that is very important. But you've also got cobalt, nickel, manganese, and so forth, vanadium, that you've got to have for these EVs. All of that is more expensive now. But if you're somebody that has access to it, like these guys do, LTHM, that's why you want to own this stock. Yep. All right, let's talk about AMCOR, Pete. AMCOR down today. It's a packaging company. And they said, again, that their demand is down, that the consumer isn't buying as much. And they say, hey, we've got to a point where consumers struggle to absorb the price increases that we're pushing through. What does that tell you, Pete?
Yeah, they're struggling, John, for a lot of different reasons. Volumes are down significantly. That's hurting them for sure. And then when you look at everything about the guidance, I mean, you and I always talk about this. When you get earnings, of course, you get the earnings and you do care about those earnings. But you also want to know a little something about what's going on the forecast. That forecast did not look good. And I think because of that, that's when everybody says, you know what, it's time to take a little break off of this stock. A lot of selling going on, a little bit of pressure onto the stock. It doesn't trade in a very massive range by any stretch, John. It's actually fairly tight. But nonetheless, it's getting hit pretty good today. So it's pushing itself down much closer to the lower end of the range. And I think it's all to do with what's going on with their guidance.
Yep. And I think that one, Pete, is one that, again, is another canary in the coal mine. We've given you a couple today. Crude oil, because of the impact there. ESTEE LAUDER, because of their insights into what consumer behavior is. And now this one, AMCOR. All right, Pete, time to talk sports. What do you got for us today?
Well, John, I think it's pretty interesting if you watch the NHL at all. And by the way, their ratings are not comparable to the other sports, but I will say this, their ratings are very strong for the NHL, and they're doing an outstanding job. Boston was the best team in all of hockey. They set records in every side of things, John, and they got kicked out in the first round against the Florida Panthers. So how did that happen? And I was taking a real nice deep dive, John. How about this? They were down, they being Florida, were down 3-1 the first 4 games that they played. and they were giving up 16 goals. So the goaltending really hurt. Well, the goaltending continued to hurt them, but they won 3 in a row and took out Boston. First round, the best team in hockey ever is out. They had the best goaltending, the best scoring, all of that. But the one thing that these guys do have, it's not in the nets, it's the ability to score. John, they've got 4 players that so far have put up in 8 games, have scored 40 goals total. So you've got a group of guys who can definitely find the puck and put the puck in the right spot. And that's exactly how they're winning. As a matter of fact, they're up right now 1-0 against Toronto. So it's one of those where, and they've got a game coming up tonight. They won 4-2. They've got to outscore people, but they can do it. I guess the question I ask you is, you've been around, you played goalie. At what point do these guys have to do a little bit better on the defensive side? Because the offense is there. They're right there. They're one of the teams that is in the top echelon in terms of scoring goals. But, man, they're giving up way too many, John. And I just wonder, at what point does this fall apart? Right now, it's looking pretty good.
Well, goaltending, unlike football, where they say defense wins championships.
Yeah.
First of all, that was in the old days, Pete, because of the rule changes in football. And I'm not saying they're bad rule changes, but because of the rule changes, offense wins those games. I mean, if Mahomes couldn't have done what he did in the Super Bowl, they don't win. I don't care about the defense. I mean, I care overall, Pete, about defense, but defense doesn't win football games anymore. It's offense at the pro level anyway, because you've got to be able to score. And for them to be able to come back against Philly like they did, Mahomes had to basically strap it on and, get that foot shot up or something. Whatever he did, that miracle foot after getting that sprained ankle, that high ankle sprained again in the first half. That was amazing. But anyway, so you were asking about hockey. First of all, this is a team that Pete and I love, Vinny Viola. He's been on with us many times on TV. He's the chairman of Virtu. He's also the chairman of, I think they call it Sunrise Sports, Pete, Sunrise Sports and Entertainment. He owns the Florida Panthers. Now, Vinnick, the former guy over at Fidelity, Pete, he owns your Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 big financial dudes down there in Florida putting up some pretty impressive things. And by the way, Pete said 3 in a row. He also said they won Sunday, so that's 4 in a row, Pete. So they're still winning it. And against the Maple Leafs, they only gave up 2 goals.
Yep.
So maybe they are playing a little more defense here, Pete. And Boston did have one of the best scoring teams in the league as well. So the fact that the goalie gave up as many goals against one of the best trios in all of hockey, I think you'll probably see a little bit better play from that goalie or their goalies over the next several series.
Yep. All right. Now we're going to jump, John. It never ends. Never, ever, ever, ever ends in the NFL or college football or even, to that level, high school football, for crying out loud. We read about these kids that are getting this NIL and this, that, and the other, and blah, 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 blah. Well, I'll tell you this, John. They've already put together some of the guys right now for the 2024 NFL draft. There's already a group of folks out there that already have mock drafts. Now, this goes before the NFL season, and anybody who knows how the NFL season goes, it's the worst team getting the first pick outside of trades and so forth, but that's just how that game works. So I don't think you even want to go into the draft part other than the players themselves, but I thought we'd look at the offense today, John. Maybe we look at the defense tomorrow, but that's going to be a little bit tougher. But from a quarterback perspective, John, I think it's pretty interesting because Caleb Williams, who we all thought was going to maybe come out last year from USC, decided to stay at USC. Now, he already had played at Oklahoma, followed the coach, went to USC. He is right now penciled in as the first pick in the entire draft. And then there's a kid named Drake May. You and I talked about him earlier in the year, last year during the fall. He's a quarterback at the University of North Carolina. He's an unbelievable athlete, big kid, strong kid, can throw the ball a ton, reminds you a little bit of Will Levis. So I think he's sort of in that category. But right now, he's ranked number 3 in the entire draft. So number 1 would be Williams. Number 3 would be May. And then number 2 is a receiver from Ohio State. That's Marvin Harrison. We all heard of his dad too, Marvin Harrison. So again, the streak goes on. And this year, John, they're looking at 8 guys from Ohio State going in the top 28, not Alabama, not Georgia. They're looking at Ohio State to have absolutely a record year of draft picks in the draft. So I think it should be pretty cool. I wanted to mention one other guy. Joe Alt is right now top of anything in offensive line, son of John Alt from the Kansas City Chiefs. He's a big kid, John. He's already 6'8". He's a very young kid still. He's only played a couple of years at Notre Dame. 6'8", 3 1/4, give or take 5 or 10 pounds. The guy is an absolute freak show, great player, and he will be somewhere in the upper echelon, maybe top 4 or 5 in the draft, depending on who needs an offensive lineman.
Well, of course, they did have those 3 first-rounders taken this year, Pete. Stroud, Paris Johnson, Nigba by the Seahawks. That was the 20th pick. And 5 overall. Do you know what that means, Pete? That means for a decade, for 10 straight years, Ohio State has had at least 5 players taken in the draft. So I tell you, and we both know Urban Meyer won a national championship there, Pete. But my gosh, they perform at a very high level, but you would think they would have more national championships with 10 years of 5 picks taken overall. They are a team that people in the South anyway, in the SEC, they don't really fear them because time and time again, really highly touted Ohio State teams have gone down there and played in the SEC and come up short. Now, like I say, not every time, but a lot. And that's something that, the new coach has to deal with here. He's going to have to figure out a way to say that, look, guys, we've been, what did that one guy say, Pete? We've been knocking on the door and now we're going to beat down that door. They got to beat down that door because they do have some of the best players. All they do is reload. I mean, take a look at the 2 quarterbacks that are fighting for that position after CJ Stroud or CJ Stroud fighting for the position after Justin Fields. I mean, they just reload, Pete. So I think these guys need to find something to get the scarlet and gray into that and over the top this year in 2023. Maybe this is the year for them, Pete. Like you said, if they really do have 8 picks, there's no excuse if you're going to have 8 picks for next year's draft in this class at Ohio State.
Totally agree with you, John. I think that, if you're Ohio State, you should be disappointed. And I'd have to say this, as much as we like the coach, Day does a great job. Obviously, he's a recruiting machine. They should have something, to your point. They should have a few national championships, maybe not 10, but they should have at least 3, maybe, I would think. I mean, look at Alabama, look at Georgia, look what happens there. Take a look at Clemson, some of those schools. USC might be an even better team this coming year. So there's going to be competition out there, but if the talent is at Ohio State, and that's what they're saying, they certainly have to deliver. At some point, they got to win a national title, and they've had some, there's no doubt, but not enough when you can consider the kind of talent that you're talking about in the last decade.
Yeah. Well, folks, we have one more Rebels Edge this week. It will be tomorrow, Thursday. I will be on with Liz Klayman right after the Fed chair delivers their 25 basis point increase and then starts to take heat from the reporters, because that's going to happen, Pete. And many of us think it's already gone too far. I would have rather, there was one thing, Pete, that I'll let the listeners finish up with this. When you have an injury, do you want to tear that Band-Aid off slow, or do you want to rip it off quick? And I'm not saying they needed to move 200 basis points like that to hit the market in the teeth, but you can't just sit there and sort of mealy mouth 25 basis points, 50 basis points or whatever. Make a statement, give it a hit, and then, don't just bleed them out with these 25 basis point moves, because I think you do more damage to psyche when you do that. And right now, like we've said, the consumer needs to know that inflation's going to be coming down, that banks are not just going to be failing right and left,
Yeah.
and that they'll be able to afford to put some gas in their tank going forward. So we'll see you tomorrow, folks, and I'll be on with Liz at 3 p.m. Eastern time today.